Sarvebhyo Namaha. I hope I am audible. At the outset, I take this opportunity to congratulate the Rishihood University, Professor Sampadananda Mishra, and every one of you here for putting together this remarkable series of lectures on Avadhanakala. For me personally, it is a gratifying experience because I have been involved with one of the greatest practitioners of Avadhanakala in our times, Shatavadhani Dr. R. Ganesh. He performs the art in multiple languages, particularly Kannada, Telugu, and Sanskrit, particularly Kannada and Telugu. So whenever an opportunity comes by to participate in a session such as this, all of us jump in with great joy. So I would once again thank the organizers of this great series of lectures. And many scholars, learned people have blessed this lecture series with their deliberations and with their lectures, with their thoughts and insights into the subject, including Professor Radhavallabh Tripathi and so on. And many people are going to speak as well. The topic for today is objectives and outcomes of Avadhanakala. Of course, with any subject, with any inquiry, 4 things must be settled at the very beginning of an inquiry. It is called as Anubandha Chatushtaya, Adhikari, Vishaya, Sambandha, and Prayojana. Adhikari is a person who is fit to take up that study, who is fit to take up the performance of a particular art form, and so on. Vishaya is the subject matter itself. In our case, it is the Avadhanakala. And Sambandha is the relationship between the Vishaya and the Adhikari. What is the relationship that a person who is fit to undertake the study with the subject matter itself? Is it Bodhya Bodhaka Sambandha? And so on. The last one is Prayojana, is the outcome or the objective. What is the outcome of engaging with this art form, or discussing it, or performing it, or seeing it as a connoisseur, as a rasika? Objectives can be outlined and enumerated at so many different levels. From the perspective of the performer or the avadhani, from the perspective of the prakshakas or the questioners who pose different queries to the avadhani, from the perspective of the sahridayas or the connoisseurs who view the program as rasikas, from the perspective of the organizers, from the perspective of a person who is interested in studying the history of an art form, from a perspective of a student of literature, and so on. These are the various vantage points from which you can approach the outcome or objectives of Avadhanakala. Now, why is it important to understand the outcomes or the objectives of Avadhanakala? It is because it gives you a sense of clarity and direction, and also a very good perspective to approach the subject. It so happens that oftentimes people have a very good understanding of the nuances of the art form itself, but when they are asked to present the cream of the art form to a lay audience, before people who have absolutely no clue what this art form is all about, they will not be able to explain it very well because the outcomes or the objectives are not very well known. And that is why our tradition, the Sanskrit tradition, makes it an important factor to be cleared at the very outset. Prayojana manuddishya na mandopi pravartate. Even a dullard, even an ignoramus will not undertake any kind of activity if there is nothing in it for him. Therefore, all of us want to know, we desire to know what we can take home from this art form. Of course, Avadhanakala is a form of art. It is a form of Indian classical performing art. When I say Avadhana, I restrict my analysis to Sahitya Avadhanam alone. Of course, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the fact that Avadhanam has many formats and comes with many varieties, such as Netra Avadhana, Sangita Avadhana, Chitra Avadhana, Veda Avadhana, Trina Avadhana, and so on. But for the sake of our present analysis, it would do us well to restrict our analysis to Sahitya Avadhanam, and I shall be doing exactly that. Sahitya Avadhanam is a composite art form. What do I mean by saying Sahitya Avadhanam is a composite art form? For people who have viewed some of the Avadhanam performances, it would be very clear that even though the main focus in Sahitya Avadhanam, as is evident from the very title, is on Sahitya or literature, more specifically classical literature, it also includes many other art forms. It includes music, sometimes it can include dance, sometimes it can include painting. It can also include various disciplines of sciences. The whole grand Indian cultural heritage can be brought in within the performance at various instances. If the Avadhani is adept in music, he can adopt those components which have a musical bent to them. For instance, when he is reciting his padyas or verses, he can set those padyas to a tune and sing them. It is enchanting for the audience, and it will help the Avadhani to capture his audience better and hold them enthralled throughout the performance. Or if he is well initiated into the nuances of the art form of dance, perhaps, he can include a component that has dance at its basis, that focuses on dance. A component such as that can be termed as Padya Abhinaya or Shloka Abhinaya, wherein the performer or wherein the questioner, the Pratchaka of that component, enacts a piece by Padabhinaya, Vakyabhinaya, Vakyarthabhinaya, and so on. And by looking at that Abhinaya or communication, aesthetic communication, the performer or the Avadhani should be able to identify what was the verse that was presented by this danseuses, by this artist in the form of dance. So it obviously means that Avadhanam can include so many other art forms as well. And in the course of the Avadhani's engagement with who is known as an Aprastuta Prasangi, who interjects time and again in order to break the concentration of the performer, many topics come up for discussion. They can range from simple topics to contemporary issues to Shastric concepts as well. The questioner can take up an issue from Nyaya Shastra, Vyakarana to modern physics, or he can just read out the headlines from today's newspaper. I'm just giving you a flavor that Avadhana has the potential to include all kinds of arts and sciences. There is nothing that is out of the ambit of the art form that is Avadhanam. And therefore, it has this immense scope to provide enjoyment and instruction to everybody involved. In the Indian tradition, two concepts are held to be of immense importance as far as art is concerned. One is Vyutpatti, the other is, of course, Rasanubhava. The latter is called as Preeti in Sanskrit. The ancient term to denote the concept of rasa is Preeti, as Bhamaha terms it. Karoti Preeting Kirtincha Sadhukavya Nishevadam. Bhamaha was an ancient aesthetician, and he was of the opinion that if one savors literature, if one composes a piece of poetry, then of course he will be able to savor it and have that aesthetic experience both for himself and for the people who read his compositions. And also he will beget fame as a result. The poet's name will travel the world. Karoti Preetim Kirtincha Sadhukavya Nishepanam. And it follows that the Avadhani will be in a position to grant his audience immense amounts of aesthetic joy and also instruction. The Indian aesthetic tradition is of the firm opinion that enjoyment and instruction are no two different things at all, because enjoyment comes with a certain degree of enlightenment as well, and enlightenment is enjoyable. That is the Indian view as far as aesthetics is concerned. Therefore, what are known as Bodha and Moda, they both go hand in hand as far as Avadhana is concerned. Because this art form is based on wonder, it stems from wonder. The aspect of Chitra Kavita is integral to Avadhanam, especially Sahitya Avadhanam. And the very word Chitra means wonder. It is to evoke wonder. If a person, without taking resort to pen or paper, if he does not pen down his thoughts or his verses, if he is able to compose a melodious verses on the fly without batting an eyelid amidst a galaxy of scholars, then of course it is to the wonder of everybody present there. And using that, the Avadhani will be able to present so many things in terms of instruction as well. And of course, enjoyment is always there. And some of our Indian aestheticians, they have enlisted some of the objectives or some of the outcomes. Kavyam yashaserthakrite vyavaharavide shivetarakshatye sadyah paranirvritaye kanta tayopadesha yuje. This is a very famous verse that Mammata has composed in his treatise Kavya Prakasha. What does this verse mean? Let us try to understand. Kavyam yashase. If a poet writes a kavya, chances are that his kavya will be read by many people who know the language, and by virtue of that, he will become famous. Kavyam yashase. He will get yashas of fame. Arthakrite. He might be even able to garner some money because of the book sales. Kavyam yashase arthakrite vyavahara vide. He will also know the nuances of worldly life because kavya stems from worldly observation. The poet cannot write his kavya in a vacuum. He should first have a very innate understanding of how people behave, react, and live in the world. And going by those experiences, having a keen understanding of the feelings of various kinds of people, the poet goes on to write his compositions. That is why Vyavahara Vide. Shivetarakshatye. It will dismiss the inauspicious, it will dispel the inauspicious. Sadyah para nirvritaye. It will give you instantaneous joy. Kamta sammitataya upadesha yuche. It will sit you down like a beloved and tell you in very sweet and appealing and graceful words that this is the way to do, this is the way to behave, this is the way to write, and so on. That is why Kanta sammitataya upadesha yuche. The word sammita means sadrisha. It is similar to a beloved. Kavya teaches us. Now this is applicable to poets in general, and Avadhani is a poet himself. Avadhani is first and foremost a poet, and everything, all rules that are connected, that hold true in the case of a poet, hold true in the case of an Avadhani or the performer as well. So these objectives or outcomes, they play a significant role as far as a performer is concerned. But we may harbor a doubt at this juncture. This is true of the poet, but what about the people who listen to them? We are talking about the art form. What about what is in there for connoisseurs? Let us try to look at some of those objectives as well. In this art form, creation and criticism go hand in hand. Oftentimes, as far as literature is concerned, two activities are very important as far as this art form is concerned. One is, of course, the creation. Creation of what? Creation of emotionally appealing, aesthetically rich verses. And we get to see the birth of verses in this art form, which is a remarkable objective, which is a remarkable outcome for all of us to take stock of. Because if we read poetry in printed books, we are not actually witnessing the birth of poetry. A poet, when he gets the spark of imagination, creative imagination, that is pratibha, when the faculty of pratibha evokes within him, when he invokes his innate faculty of pratibha, how it comes out through his mouth as expression instantaneously. What is the process that is involved amid the presence of other questioners? Seated in a hall, how does an Avadhani do it? we get to experience the birth of poetry, which is quite remarkable. And not just we get to experience the birth of poetry, also we get to know how to understand those verses. So the criticism that is very much essential to understand those verses that are so instantaneously composed, the commentary to understand it is also present. Of course, there is no external agency separating the connoisseurs from the performer. There is no need for vimarshakas here who act as a go-between in many cases between the poets and the connoisseurs. Here, the Sahrdayas have the freedom and liberty to take stock of or apprise the poems that are so composed. But the Avadhani assists them. The Avadhani, by way of his commentary on not just his verses, but also on verses composed by the questioners, on verses composed by master poets by way of his exposition during the course of the program, equips the audience with the aesthetic sensibility that is very much required to appreciate poems. So in this art form, one of the major objectives is that creation and criticism go hand in hand. And like I said, we get to witness the process of art creation. And the Avadhanakala is also a beautiful art form to propagate classical literature. This is a very important objective of the art form of Avadhanam. We often feel that classical literature is fast fading. There are not many takers for classical literature, not just here in our country, anywhere in the world. Classical literature is soon fading into oblivion. And people are undertaking all kinds of efforts in order to check this degeneration of classical literature. And among all those measures aimed at safeguarding classical literature, Avadhanakala is one of the most efficient forms. Why is it one of the most efficient forms? It is because, again, it provides enjoyment. It talks to the sense of wonder that is innately present in all of us. And by way of it, it can propagate, it can disseminate the values of classical literature. In a language like Kannada, which has been around for thousands of years, there has been a marked change, metamorphosis, transformation in the way language is thought, in the way language is conceived. The language of Pampa, the Adikavi, was thought to be Halagannada. Then came Nadugannada. Now we have Hosagannada. So all languages undergo this transformation. And in an art form such as Avadhana, we have this remarkable opportunity to interact with the language in all its forms. We get to see what Halagannada sounded like. What was it to witness a composition written in Nadugannada, for instance? And how can we employ our spoken tongue, the modern idiom in poetry, in the form of conversation between the Aprastuta Prasangi and the Avadhani? The Nadugannada or the modern idiom comes to play, and so on. We also get to witness all the forms of linguistic expression, prose, verse, and song. All these three are present. Prose in the form of conversations, verse, of course, all poetic compositions in a Avadhana, they are in the form of verses, and even songs. There can be many components, like I explained previously, that can have the element of music ingrained in them, and therefore prose, verse, and song, the three basic modes of linguistic expression, all find an appropriate place in Avadhanam. And that is why this is such a great avenue, such a great platform to propagate classical literature. If you take the example of Andhra, for example, the undivided land of Andhra, now Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, be that as it may, people there respond so naturally to classical literature, and Avadhana has played a very important role in keeping this classicism alive in the land of Andhra. How is this possible? People there know what is a Samasya Purti, know what does it mean when an Avadhani composes a Dattapadi verse, the nuances or the intricacies or the complexities involved in a component such as Nishiddhakshari. What does it mean to compose an Ashu Kavita? People, even the proverbial common man in Andhra Pradesh, knows all of these nuances. and therefore they are able to appreciate their own classical literature better. The Kavitraya Mahabharata or the Andhra Bhagavata penned by Bammera Potana and so on, these works even today appeal to all the common people because they have this link of classicism kept alive through the efforts of various Avadhanis and proponents of classical literature. And some of the other benefits of this art form is it has something to offer to all kinds of people. It is light and serious, simple and sophisticated in turns, and therefore, if a child watches the Avadhana performance, even the child has something to grasp, even though it might not understand the nuances of the versification that is happening on stage. Even the child will have something to wonder at and to try to emulate in its own small way. If a scholar watches an Avadhana performance, he will have many things to grasp. He will get perhaps to learn about a new avenue of Shastra that perhaps was left unexplored till then. He might be able to come across a very beautiful Shabda Prayoga, usage and linguistic expression that is very beautiful, that is found in works, say, such as Patanjala Mahabhashya or Chaturbhani or some such things. So Avadhana has this huge bandwidth that has something to offer to all kinds of people. And it also helps preserve the great tradition of Indian literature. And when I say Indian literature, it is not just Sanskrit. All the other Indian languages, Telugu, Kannada, Marathi, Hindi, and so on, Tamil, Gujarati, Bengali, all these languages in the past have taken up Avadhana to some extent. And even today, there is ample opportunity to take up, for competent people to take up this art form in their own regional languages and try to propagate classical literature through the art of Sahitya Avadhana. So these are some of the literary benefits that we can derive from Sahitya Avadhana. There are also, of course, some non-literary benefits. It helps you to achieve a certain degree of lateral thinking. So when an Avadhani attempts to think of a solution to a riddle posed to him in the course of Samasya Purana, a linguistic challenge that is posed to him, he has to think out of the box. He has to think laterally. So that lateral thinking is ingrained in the very nuts and bolts of this art form, that is Sahitya Avadhanam. And therefore, this lateral thinking is present, and multitasking, of course, is always there. Because Sahitya Avadhanam, basically, even though if it involves 8 components, it is termed Ashtavadhanam. If it involves 100 components or questioners, it is termed as Shatavadhanam. If it involves 1,000, it is termed as Sahasravadhanam, and so on. But basically, at the fundamental level, there is something called as Dvyavadhanam that is going on in the questioners or in the minds of the Avadhani and outside of him. Any activity, for that matter, has 2 sides to it. One is important and the other is unimportant. So when we say an Avadhani does multitasking, an Avadhani multitasks, it means to say that the Avadhani prioritizes his activities in basically 2 important rungs. In the first rung, he accommodates all the important activities. By important, I mean all those activities that demand his immediate attention and the other activities that are not so important. Our Shastrakaras invoke a Laukika Nyaya in order to explain this. It is a worldly maxim, Suchi Kataha Nyaya. It is the maxim involving a person who is a blacksmith, and a person who comes to this blacksmith and asks him to fashion a needle, to make a needle out of some metal for him. And when he is posed with this question, the blacksmith is actually engaged in making something more big. He is engaged in making a boiler. It is, of course, evident that making a boiler is much more complicated and takes much more time, energy, and resources than making a mere needle, which is just small and does not take that much time. So what does the blacksmith do? A person has come to him requesting him to make a needle. This is a legitimate order. So what does he do? He will temporarily stop the making of the boiler, stop the process wherever it is, and go and quickly make the needle that is requested of him, and then come back and resume the process of making a boiler. This is what is termed as Suchi Kataha Nyaya, wherein you invest your concentration to something that is unimportant or something that is not in the same league as what you are involved in before. You quickly finish it and come back to your main activity. Similarly, when an Avadhana performance is going on, when it is unfolding, many questioners are there whose only job is to break the concentration of the performer. They are brought in there in order to concentrate on this job alone. The Aprastuta Prasangi, for instance, the Sankhya Bandha Prachaka, and Pushpa Ganana, Ghanta Ganana, many other components are there. So what usually happens is an Aprastuta Prasangi just might even cut a joke, might just call the Avadhani's name and might not even ask a question. These things have happened previously. What does it mean? The Avadhani might be totally immersed in trying to think of a solution for Samasya Purana, in trying to think of the next letter in Nishiddhakshari. When such a great calamity has befallen him in terms of the other components, here are the other questioners trying to draw his attention in for a freewheeling chat, for a light conversation, light-hearted conversation, and so on. So the Avadhani should not lose his poise, should not lose his sense of calm. He must have a smiling face and should have a cheerful demeanor throughout the performance. He should quickly answer these seemingly unimportant questions. Of course, no question is unimportant. It is only unimportant from the perspective of the Avadhani, who has to get back to versification. So he quickly answers these queries and gets back to his active job of versification, thinking of a solution to Chitrakavya and so on. So that is the element of multitasking that is there. And time and again in modern times, we learn the value of time, how time is of the essence, even at your workplace. If somebody works in the software industry, they put in long hours and at the end of the day, they are burnt out. How to manage your time efficiently? Avadhana has a lesson to offer in that as well, by teaching you the lesson of the Avadhana. And of course, there is the element of crisis management that is always there. I alluded to the concept of the component of Nishiddhakshari, where it is imperative for the Avadhani to think of at least 2 letters at every instant. In Pratyakshara Nishedha, I am sure everybody here is familiar with what Nishiddhakshari is, so I shall not go into explaining the component itself. In Nishiddhakshari, a performer has to compose the verse by adhering to the restrictions laid out by the questioner. The questioner says, I restrict you to not use this letter. You may not use this letter. You may not use this letter at every instant. So the performer has to have at least 2 options in his mind. If he just has one option in his mind in terms of a single letter, if the questioner negates using that letter, he will be left with no possible option at all. So it is imperative for the Avadhani to think of at least 2 options and do it quickly on the fly. His Prasanga Avadhanam, his ability to think on the fly comes to a test here. So the concept of crisis management is also very much present in the Avadhana. All these things are there. These are benefits or outcomes or objectives that can be focused on the Rasikas or the questioners and so on. What is there for the Avadhani himself? Because the Avadhani is the person at the center of the performance. Avadhanam asmin asti ityavadhani. An Avadhani is a person who has remarkable degrees of concentration. That is why he is the cynosure of all eyes as far as this art form is concerned. And for him, the art form offers a beautiful opportunity for self-elevation, for self-enrichment, for self-enhancement. Now, the Indian tradition always has this overarching motto, Jagadhitaya cha, Atmano Moksharthan Jagadhitaya cha, has always been the greatest of Indian mottos. And Avadhana as an art form provides an opportunity, affords an opportunity for the Avadhani to elevate himself. How does this happen? If you see, the Avadhani is tried and tested publicly. All his knowledge, all his sense of creativity is put to a test every single time while the public gazes at him. And for this, in order to take in all this criticism, the Avadhani gets a lesson in curtailing his ego. All of us know how hard it is to subdue our own ego, to let go of our narrow self-interests. It is very difficult. And this is where the Kala Shastra progresses to Adhyatma Shastra. So Avadhana takes, if the Avadhani is well receiving, if he is so perceptive, then the art form affords him an opportunity to elevate himself. And this self-reliance is also there. The Avadhani has nobody to help him. Nobody helps the Avadhani. Even though the questioners might be Avadhani's friends, might be his relatives, but even so, they will not water down their queries or questions in order to make the game or the event easy for the Avadhani to get passed by. It does not happen that way. In Nishiddhakshari, a proper, veritable tug of war happens between the questioner and the performer, wherein every single letter has to be won. There has to be an intellectual battle, a sword fight that happens, and the performer has to emerge victorious. And that is why this art form has the dimension of a sport as well. This is both a kala and a krida. In a krida, in watching the krida, in watching a sport, the audience must feel involved, and they should have this experience of their adrenaline pumping up at every level. And that is, the onus is on the performer to make sure that this happens. And the Avadhani has also to submit himself to the public for criticism. Anybody can criticize him. It does not matter if the Avadhani is an accomplished performer. He has performed thousands and thousands of Ashtavadhanams and hundreds of Shatavadhanams previously. It does not matter. Even so, a new Avadhanam on a given day might not appeal to the audience. It might really be a flop. The Avadhani should have that internal composure to say, yes, this is beyond me. I did whatever I could, but still the outcome of the Avadhanam is something that I cannot control by myself. The Avadhani has to learn to take everything in a samachitta. Dukkhe dukkeshvanabhignavanaha sukheshu vigataspruhaha vitaraga bhayakrodhaha hitadhihi uniruchyate. So the Avadhani, at least in this limited time of the performance, should have that element of munitva, that sthita pragyatva in him, in order to take everything in a samachitta manner. And that is why the Avadhana is a veritable karma yoga. It is not just a karma, it is not just a leela, it is a karma yoga. Because the Avadhani performs to the best of his ability, tries to enchant the audience, and tries to compose verses that are aesthetically very much appealing. But at the same time, he knows that the outcome is not in his hand. If people are there, a couple of people even in the audience, who choose not to laugh at the Avadhani's jokes, who choose not to respond at all to the Avadhanam performance that is unfolding so beautifully before their eyes, then the Avadhani can do nothing. He cannot force his views down the throats of his audience. He cannot do anything about it. He can only do his job well. And that is why the outcome is beyond the performer, whereas the task at hand is very much under his control. This is the crux, of course, of Karma Yoga. And in the modern day, we hear so many complaints regarding the mental health, regarding the psychological well-being of all human beings. Self-pity, victimhood, these are evils that are befalling all of us, especially people who work long hours, have problems at home. People have all kinds of issues. So Avadhanakala helps overcome self-pity as well, helps overcome victimhood as well. Because if the Avadhani plays a victim card, nobody comes to his help and says, okay, you are underprivileged, so your performance might be evaluated in a different scale. That does not happen at all. The scales are same to be evaluated to everyone. So that Avadhani should be so self-reliant, so supremely self-confident about his learning, about his pratibha, about his abhyasa, or the our time that he has spent in mastering this art form, that he is there, of course, in order to impress, that jigisha, that the confidence in him to overcome even the greatest of scholars leads him to emerge victorious while performing. And of course, what the Yoga Shastra terms as Mudita, Maitri, Karuna, and Upeksha, these are the greatest benefits, these are the greatest outcomes of the Avadhana Kala as well. And this is how a mere Kala turns into Kala Yoga. Mudita is enjoyment. Maitri, a geniality, an attitude of companionship, camaraderie between the questioners. The Avadhani, while remaining firm in his opinions, while placing his feet firmly on the ground, cannot shout down the questioners, cannot scream and holler and make a hue and cry about his own opinions, cannot pontificate, he need not assume an attitude of superciliousness. All these things are uncalled for. He should be very genial, Mudita Maitri. Karuna, he should also have some compassion. And Upeksha, this Upeksha leads him to take everything with the Samachittata, Dukkha and Sukha, because the outcomes really are not in his hands. So these are some of the objectives and outcomes of the art form of Avadhanam. With this, I close my monologue and invite questions. If there are any, I will be very happy to answer them if I know the answers. Thank you very much. Sarvebhyo Namaha.
Thank you so much, sir. It's a wonderful session and very much informative. I hope our participants have got an opportunity to understand the major objectives and outcomes of Avadhanam. And you just related to the Avadhanakala with all Indian literature and like yoga, Naya, and what is the relevance of Indian aesthetics and Avadhanakala, and all these aspects are covered in your talk. So, so I request the participants, if you can please switch on your video. Meanwhile, we can take few questions from your side. If anybody have to need more clarification regarding today's lecture, please you can interact with Shashi Kiran, sir.
It was a wonderful lecture.
Thank you.
Very sharp, very precise. There's
you.
nothing really to ask question, because it was so precise that we have understood what you have stated. Thank you very much for your lecture.
Thanks for your kind words, sir.
I hope any questions or any discussion with sir, and you can proceed. Okay. So I have put a link in chat box for attendance and feedback. Before leaving, please try to fill it. Okay. Anyway, thank you so much all of you for joining with us today. So thank you so much, sir, and this wonderful session once again. And our 8th session will be on 26th December. So with Dr. S. Vaishnavi, Assistant Professor, National Sanskrit University, Tirupati, on the topic of exploring Avadhana, a psychological perspective on exceptional cognitive abilities. So our next session is on 26th. Yeah.
On
Yes,
26th,
sir?
you said no, 26th.
Yeah, sir, 26th. Tomorrow and day after tomorrow, we don't have
Shashi
any
Kiran,
session.
are you practicing Avadhani? No, you are on mute.
Sorry, I just unmuted myself. I have been involved as a questioner. I don't perform it myself. So, I had the privilege of co-authoring a book in English on Avadhanam with Dr. R. Ganesh. So that is the extent of my involvement.
Oh, that is, you have worked with R. Ganesh.
Ji.
Professor. Okay. And you are based where?
In Bangalore, sir, Karnataka.
No, I think there was no question because I think it was very precise.
Thank you.
Yeah, sir, in chat box, there is one thing. Then can you please share your reading list? Because you mentioned a lot of books and literature and some
Sure.
of participants.
Sure. The book that Dr. Ganesh and I have written, The Art and Science of Avadhanam in Sanskrit, is published by Prekshaa Pratisthana from Bangalore. It is available for purchase. Prekshaa Pratisthana. It is available on Amazon and most other bookshops. You can try to get a copy. And as far as Avadhana is concerned, most literature is there in Kannada or Telugu. I don't know of any book specifically related to Avadhanam in the English language. So regarding Indian literature or regarding Indian aesthetics, of course, there are great books. You can refer to the writings of Professor M. Hiriyanna, Dr. V. Raghavan, Dr. K. Krishnamurthy, and so on, in order to get an understanding of Indian aesthetics and Indian literature. Of course, the Sahitya Academy has published a series of books under the title Indian Kavya Literature and Indian Literature, edited by Professor Shishir Kumar Das, if I'm not mistaken. So this will give you a great flavor of what Indian literature is like. And so I think, yeah, you can refer to these books.
Okay, thank you, sir. In chat box, some other comments are there. And Prekshaa book list was not available on poetry or verification, and other lists were accessible.
Oh, you mean to see the book lists on the Prekshaa website on various topics such as temples and so on. We will try to have a book list soon on poetry or versification too. We'll work on that. So thank you for that feedback. Yes.